Our first speaker for the day is Vincent Maher, who is the digital strategist for the Mail and Guardian. For those of you who don't know, the weekly Mail and Guardian was the first newspaper in Africa on the internet. It's currently the biggest single newspaper website in South Africa, and it is also the sixth largest website in the country. They also started mobile news services more than 3 years ago. And to tell us about what's happening on their website and the future trends in innovation and new media, we have Vincent Maher, who is the strategist at the Mail and Guardian Online, also the co-founder of amatomu.com, which is the South African blog aggregator and analytics system. Previously, he was the director of the New Media Lab at the Rhodes University School of Journalism and Media Studies. Before that, the managing director of digital commerce and the multimedia director at WW Interactive. He's a veteran of the online news industry, which is all of 10 years old. It started actually in 1996. Has presented papers at many international conferences and specializes in profitable innovation in emerging markets. Will you all please welcome our first speaker of Day 3 of Digital Africa, Vincent Maher. Vincent, you have about 20 minutes. We, by the way, have a load shedding at 10 o'clock, unfortunately, so we need to move really fast to get all our speakers done on time. Thank you.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It is truly an honor to be able to speak in front of such a distinguished crowd this morning. I'm going to be focusing on discussing innovation in social and mobile media, and I'll be drawing on some examples of the projects that we've worked on over the past year. My responsibilities at the Mail and Guardian currently are really to drive innovation, specifically outside of the general news field. So we're working very aggressively within the social media and Web 2.0 space at the moment. During the past year, we've launched something called amatomu.com, which is a blog aggregator. For those of you familiar with the traditional news environments, you'll know how radically different this type of work is from what ordinarily occurs in a newsroom. This is an environment which allows bloggers to rank themselves based on actual traffic. So it's a combination of an analytics system and an aggregation system with a little bit of social networking thrown in. And the second thing is something called Thought Leader, which is essentially a very large group blog of invited experts from within the country who comment on socio-political issues. And both of these projects have been phenomenal successes, although they fit outside of our ordinary business models. And I'm going to be talking a little bit about that later on. So firstly, let me discuss what I mean by social media. Within this environment, there are certain different types of applications. For instance, blogging. I'm sure most of you are familiar with what blogging is. Blogging is probably represents the biggest explosion of the written word in the entire human history. There are millions and millions of blogs springing up all around the world with people communicating their personal experiences, their technical expertise, and whatever their field of specialization are. The next step here is social networking, which allows people to connect with each other and communicate. And essentially what happens here is the creation of something called the social graph, which is really your network of communication with people, and it is, I guess, on an information level, an indication of where you fit in within your social environment. The other thing that's really become big over the last 2 years is media sharing. Sites like YouTube, Flickr, environments where people can create media themselves using mobile or digital devices, upload and share their content. What this has done in the news media industry is it's created a phenomenon called citizen journalism, which really is a democratization of the traditional news gathering process, where people who would previously have been eyewitnesses now can create their own media and share it. And in many cases, bloggers and people using Flickr and photo sharing and YouTube have beaten journalists to the story because they've been on the scene with portable devices that allow them to capture media. And the super phase of all of this is aggregation. There's a lot of discussion about where exactly aggregation fits in. It's a system which allows you to essentially order and sort all these millions of new pieces of content and allow the communities that are consuming them to define the value and the priority that this stuff must be displayed to the audiences. Now, in terms of innovation in Africa, there's some key benefits. Firstly, from a strategic positioning point of view, the market is relatively wide open in Africa for innovation, particularly in the Web 2 and social media space. This also provides information or I guess opportunities for massive data gathering. So as an example with Amatomo, we track 300,000 page impressions a day across the blogosphere. It's about 8 million a month. And we know exactly who's posting what on their blogs, who's consuming that content, what it is about. We have extensive metadata. And we're using that to essentially enhance our news offering by being able to pull out related blog posts to news stories, to be able to do things that I guess are relevant to PR and marketing companies, like being able to data mine what people are blogging about certain companies and how those companies are being mentioned in this blogging space. It also creates an environment for quite dramatic social change, and I'll be discussing that a little bit later. But the way that people interact with each other and the way that they create content is changing in a very radical way. And this has socioeconomic implications, it has political implications. And as I said, it's a very fresh industry in Africa at this point. So there are very unique opportunities to be able to create new applications for the African markets that don't already exist. The biggest problem for the African market at this point is that African content gets drowned out in the global scale. So the key players for innovation at this point, obviously government and telecommunications companies in terms of regulation and policy and promotion of innovation, media companies who already have the audiences and therefore have an opportunity to launch new products into the market and promote them through existing successful ventures, and entrepreneurs. And in South Africa in particular, the entrepreneurial sector within the Web 2.0 market has really been driving that industry. Although many corporates and media companies are involved in doing this kind of thing, it really is the programmers and the web developers on the ground who are building applications that are experimental that are driving that industry from an innovation point of view. Let me just talk statistics. So these are the top 10 internet countries based on fixed line access in Africa, Nigeria, Morocco, Egypt, and then South Africa fourth. So we currently have 5.1 million users. Obviously, Nigeria is quite significantly ahead of us and growing very quickly. But in terms of the bigger pie, and I'm sure you know this, we're looking at about 3.4% of the global internet market, which means actually it's a good thing for us because it means that international attention has not necessarily been paid to these social media applications in Africa, which is a great opportunity in the long run for us to innovate in that environment. And we can look at best practices internationally and adapt those to our own specific cultural or social needs. But the conclusion that we've essentially come to this past year of innovation is that the future of social media is definitely in the mobile space. These are slightly old statistics, and in fact in your handbooks you've got updated ones. But you can see the blue area is mobile penetration, and the orange is fixed line. So mobile clearly is going to be a mass medium in the future. It's going to be bigger than television, it's going to be bigger than newsprint, and it's something that needs to be considered very carefully in terms of any corporate, media, or government strategy. One of the key things that mobile enables us to do is to combine identity, which is attached to a personal or wearable device, with location. So as mobile phones become increasingly location aware, what happens is that you have a new form of social interaction that develops there that really governs the way that people interact with each other and the way that people interact with the physical environment. To give you an example, there's a website, it's a promotion by Nokia to promote the N82. It's called theworldismycanvas.com. It's narrated by a very interesting character called Stavros, and what he does is he creates position art using GPS and his phone. So he physically walks in the environment and creates art on top of cities and in the physical environment. So you can see here how the physical environment is becoming a navigational device for data. And traditionally we have had maps. Cartography is a very ancient art, I guess, with growing degrees of accuracy. But now that we have GPS gradually being incorporated into standard handsets, what happens is that the way that people interact with the physical environment is going to be radically different. Imagine, for instance, a scenario where bloggers or restaurant reviewers can physically leave a note on a plate so that when other people walk in it says, do you want to read reviews that other people have left on this physical place? Another quite interesting thing that's happening, I don't know if you can really see what's going on in this picture, it looks a bit like a mess. This is a flash mob. Now the way that flash mobs work is that people organize via mobile to meet at a certain place at a certain time for a certain duration. This is in Palermo, and about 400 people got together at a particular time and lay down inside a square on the ground for 10 minutes and then got up and walked away. This is an example in Paddington Station in London, where people had arranged that at a specific time they'd all wear their wearable audio devices, and at precisely the same time they'd put the same song on their iPods or whatever it is and start dancing inside the station. There were about 3,000 people. They danced for about 10 minutes and then walked away. So suddenly what's happening is that crowds can appear and disappear within seconds based on coordination via mobile devices. Politically, some would see this as a dangerous omen for the future, but at the end of the day, what it shows is that people are going to start treating the physical environment differently and the way that they organize themselves around it. Other things, yesterday or the day before, Microsoft announced something called Live Mesh, which allows you to synchronize your mobile phone with your PC, with your web-based applications, with your desk-bound computer, which means effectively now that your office and your work environment can begin moving around with you at regardless of where you physically are, and all your data remains synchronized. So I just want to talk a little bit about the future and where we are now in terms of the web and social media. Web 1, by definition, really is something that happened pre-2004 that involved a web of physical pages, right? You obviously are aware of the fact that physical web pages do not contain any intrinsic information about the type of information that they contain. Web 2 has become a web of applications. With the growth of things like Facebook and various other Google initiatives, the web has become more and more interactive and has started to resemble what we previously would associate with desktop applications. Now, that's the current phase that we're in. It's probably going to go on for another 3 or 4 years. The next phase, which some have dubbed Web 3, others are talking in terms of something called the semantic web, is a web of knowledge. This means that the pages that get displayed in your browser are really just the tip of the iceberg, and below that is a deeply structured semantic set of data that can be indexed, which enables ultimately things like artificial intelligence bots to be able to compile, for instance, a travel itinerary for you on the fly, because those bots will know exactly what the difference is between a flight schedule and a page sort of a corporate page with about us information. So the structure of the data that's underlying the web is gradually changing. These projects have been initiated already, specifically by Tim Berners-Lee, who in fact invented the World Wide Web. So these are his plans for the future, to create a richly structured layer of data just below the surface of what we could see that can be used by the machines on our behalf. So in terms of our innovation, the tools that we've used, specifically, and I think this is something that we promote quite a lot, is open source software. We found this to work in a very effective manner for us, specifically in terms of Web 2.0 and innovation. And another tool is a positive attitude. I've encountered many people who said to me, we don't have the technical expertise, we don't know how to learn this stuff, America is so far ahead of us. In fact, the only difference really is a difference in attitude. This technology is freely accessible, it's well documented, and it's easy enough to learn. There really isn't a barrier to entry here, or if there is, it's very low. And a lot of the barriers, in fact, are ones that we put up ourselves to learning this technology and adopting it. And of course, some money. Now, to give an example, with Amatomo and Thought Leader, our entire budget was absolutely negligible. We built it in-house, these 2 applications. They were profitable within the first month, and in fact, between the 2 of them, they contribute about 10 to 15% of our total traffic now after a 6-month period. And our budget was probably less than 10,000 Rand in total. excluding the cost of the resources that actually developed it. So my final message here really is that innovators are going to be writing the rules of the future. So ultimately we'll have to ask ourselves, are we going to be these people, or are we going to be the people that watch? And I think specifically within Africa, there are massive, massive opportunities to be market leaders and early adopters within these technologies. And not necessarily to ring-fence African content, but to start leveraging it. There are massive explosions of blogging in Kenya, in Nigeria, in South Africa, all over the continent. These types of content, the people that are creating this are the kind of people that are going to build and work on these information services. They're also the kind of people who are going to be using their mobile devices to create content more and more. So the question really is, on which side of the fence do you want to be, and are you going to leverage this groundswell of consumer content that's being produced? Thank you very much.
Thanks, Vincent. We have time for about 2 or 3 questions, comments from the audience. Anyone want to raise your hand and ask a question? Feel free to do so. I have a quick one for you otherwise, Vincent. One of the very interesting things about websites from Africa, Asia, etc., is a lot of the traffic also comes from diaspora. People from South Africa, for instance, living outside of South Africa. Are there any special strategies you devised to tap into the interest, the advertising potential of diaspora from South Africa?
Well, it's an interesting thing because what we found is that on particular types of content we know that South Africans, as an example, living in London will tend to comment on more. In terms of our advertising mechanism and our targeting, we can geo-target users based on the country of origin. It's not a precise art, but we can generally know when someone's coming from the UK or Europe or the US. So we do in fact sell advertising that is targeted at that market. The thing is that at the moment we're really focused on the domestic market in terms of advertising sales. If you look at the breakdown of our traffic, it's about 50-50 local domestic users to international users. Local advertisers are not really interested necessarily in users from outside of the country, but there are occasionally those who specifically want to appeal to users that are based in London or Australia. And we find that more in our recruitment rather than our traditional display advertising. So people who want to advertise jobs to those people, to perhaps encourage them to return to the country, or in fact, those jobs are based outside of the country.
Questions, comments from the audience? You mentioned briefly about mobile. Can you talk about some of the mobile services you're offering? I know many newspapers started off with giving SMS alerts, right, SMS news, but how do you make it more interactive?
So one of the things that we've done is we've incorporated pretty much all the different types of mobile media except MMS. So we do SMS news alerts, which people subscribe to, but whenever we roll out a new website or web application, a mobile site is part of that strategy from the very beginning. We don't do anything that doesn't have a mobile component anymore. And one of the biggest, barriers to entry was explaining to users how to actually access that mobile site on their phone. So one of the ways that we worked around it was that we created a short code SMS that people could SMS that would send them a bookmark, so that the user could simply click on it, and however their phone and browser defaults were set up, they could open that page, which really took the pressure off us to have a manual that managed the instructions for about 150 different types of mobile phones. So that really has been an empowering set of technologies, that WAP push mechanism that we're using, and it's been fairly successful. And across all our mobile sites, what we've noticed is that because it's still early days in terms of content in this environment, we get a lot of exposure from search engines like the Google mobile search and mobile news and so on. So if you get into that environment now in terms of producing content, it's going to yield very big rewards for you in the long run.
And final question, do you have any co-branding partnership initiatives with mobile operators or ISPs in South Africa?
We do and we don't, in the sense that there are several mobile operators who will use our content, take our headlines and abstracts of our stories. So we provide that content to them. Generally the way it works is that they will provide links back to our mobile site, and it's a sort of quid pro quo relationship. In terms of internet service providers, we have a relationship with several of them. And in fact, syndication is a very important way to drive traffic into these communities and sites. So we have a standard procedure for providing headlines and little bits of content for sites that want to, I guess, enhance their content offering on the surface of things.
Thanks, Vincent. A round of applause, please, for the first
Thank you very
opening
much.
speaker of the day.